What if Santa Claus wasn't jolly? What if one Christmas he didn't bring gifts, but guns? Sounds like the start of a crazy movie, right? Except it actually happened. This is the true story of how a man in a red suit brought chaos to a peaceful Texas town just 2 days before Christmas. There were shootouts, hostages, a manhunt, and an ending so wild you'd swear it was made up. But every word of it is real. Let me take you back to Cisco, Texas, 1927, where one Christmas holiday turned into a nightmare no one saw coming. It was December 23rd, 1927, just 2 days before Christmas. The town of Cisco was getting into the holiday spirit. Kids played on sidewalks, giggling in scarves and mittens. The local shops were packed with families buying toys, sweets, and decorations. And at the First National Bank, the tellers were hoping for a quiet day so they could close early and head home for the holidays. Little did they know, something terrifying was about to walk through the door. He was no stranger to crime. A man molded by bad luck, worse choices, and a knack for slipping past the law. Marshal Ratliff had been out of prison for less than a year. He was a bank robber by trade, and he needed cash. So what does a man like that do? He goes back to what he knows best, robbing banks. But there was a catch. He couldn't just stroll into any old town and pull a heist, especially not Cisco. People there knew his face. If he walked in with a gun, someone would recognize him before he even said a word. It'd all be over before it began. So he needed a disguise, something bold and something no one would expect. And that's when he got this crazy idea. What if he dressed up as Santa Claus? He didn't wear the suit to make people happy. He wasn't there for the kids or the holiday spirit. That costume was just a way to hide who he really was. He figured if he wore the red suit and white beard, no one would look twice. People would smile, kids would wave. And by the time they realized what was really going on, it'd be too late. But he couldn't do it alone. So he put together a crew. First, there was Henry Helms. He had a bad temper and didn't think twice before reaching for his gun. Next came Robert Hill. He was younger, talked in a more relaxed way, and knew how to stay calm under pressure. But don't let that fool you, because he was just as dangerous. And then there was Louis Davis. He wasn't like the others. He was a cute family guy and had never robbed a bank before. He was nervous and unsure, but he needed money. That was enough to pull him in. The plan was simple, at least on paper. Ratliff would play Santa, stroll into the First National Bank while everyone was distracted with holiday cheer, and act like he was just spreading Christmas joy. Then, when no one was expecting it, the other three would follow him in with guns drawn. It had to be fast and clean. And the best part? No one would ever suspect that the man behind it all, dressed in a red suit with a white beard, was actually a bank robber hiding in plain sight. It was a bold plan, but also incredibly risky, and it was about to spin completely out of control. Ratliff's plan wasn't just about stealing money. It felt more like a performance. He put on the red suit and practiced his ho-ho-ho, making sure the white cotton beard sat just right on his face. While he got into character, the rest of the gang quietly loaded their guns and checked their gear. They knew what they were doing. It was like they were getting ready for a show. But this wasn't going to bring smiles or laughter. It was about to turn a cheerful holiday into something dark and terrifying. That morning, Ratliff suited up. He looked just like you'd imagined Santa would. Big red coat, fluffy beard, black boots. As he walked down the main street toward the bank, kids trailed behind him, laughing and calling out, "Santa, Santa." He waved, he laughed, he even patted one little boy's head. But the people had no idea that behind the smile and red suit, he was hiding a much darker plan. At exactly noon, Santa Claus walked into the First National Bank of Cisco. Nobody screamed, nobody ran, because, well, who's scared of Santa? He walked around the room, pretending to be friendly, but as soon as the other three men entered, guns drawn, the truth came out. "This is a robbery," one of them shouted. The tellers dropped to the ground. Customers scrambled, running behind counters and chairs. In seconds, the peaceful bank turned into complete chaos. Ratliff pulled out his pistol and began barking orders. The gang moved fast, rounding up hostages and forcing employees to empty cash drawers. They were there for money, but also for bonds. Thousands of dollars worth. Everything was going as per the plan. Until it wasn't. They reached the vault, the heart of the bank, the real prize, and that's when it happened. The door was locked, not just simply locked. It was on a timer. No combination, no key, no amount of shouting or gun waving could change that. It wouldn't open until the timer said so. The gang was stuck. Seconds turned to minutes. Tension cracked the air, and in that moment of delay and confusion, someone escaped. One woman managed to sneak out through the back door while the chaos was unfolding. She didn't stop to look back. She just ran fast, straight to the nearest police station. Bursting through the doors, she shouted about what was happening at the bank. The officers didn't need every detail, just one word: robbery, and they were already grabbing their guns. The news spread like wildfire. Within minutes, Cisco's police were on the move. And so were the townspeople. In the 1920s, Texas, most folks owned guns and weren't afraid to use them. The robbers had no idea, but outside, a small army was forming. As time ticked by and tension rose, the crowd outside grew larger and louder. Soon, the town square felt less like Christmas and more like a battlefield waiting to explode. When Police Chief G.E. Bedford and Officer George Carmichael arrived at the bank, they didn't know exactly what they were walking into. All anyone could say was that Santa Claus was inside the bank with a gun. Chief Bedford didn't wait. He pushed through the growing crowd outside with a shotgun in his hand, ready for whatever was coming. Officer Carmichael was right behind him, but just as they got close to the door, gunfire lit up the street. The townspeople started shooting, too. Not just the police, but shopkeepers, ranchers, and even teenagers with old hunting rifles. It became a full-on battle. Inside the bank, the robbers returned fire. Glass shattered, bricks cracked, smoke filled the air. Chief Bedford took a bullet. He collapsed on the sidewalk. Carmichael was hit twice, but somehow he survived. During the chaos, the robbers grabbed what cash they could, stuffed it into 2 sacks, and looked for a way out. And here's where the story takes another dark turn. They grabbed 2 hostages, 10-year-old Emma Mae Robertson and her 12-year-old sister Frances. The gang pushed the girls ahead of them as they exited the bank, guns still in hand, using children as human shields. Everyone stopped in their tracks. No one dared to fire a shot, not with 2 little girls standing in the line of danger. That hesitation was all the gang needed. They moved quickly, slipping out of the bank and heading straight for their stolen getaway car, waiting in the alley. The girls were pushed into the back seat, and the car took off in a blur. Behind them, angry citizens jumped into cars, wagons, and even onto horses. The chase was on. The robbers thought they could outrun the townspeople, but things didn't go as planned. For the next 24 hours, the gang kept running. They drove through small roads and open fields, trying to stay ahead of the people chasing them. The two young girls they had taken from the bank were still with them, cold and scared. Then their car ran out of gas. So after their first car gave out, they managed to stop another vehicle. They forced the driver out and took it. But things kept going wrong. They didn't know the back roads well and soon got turned around. Every turn felt like a dead end. The tension was rising, and somewhere along the way, the weight of it all must have gotten to them. They let the two young girls go, just left them there, shivering in the freezing wind. And surprisingly, they both survived the strong winds. Back in the towns nearby, word had spread like wildfire. This robbery has literally changed into a manhunt at this point. Texas Rangers got involved. Local sheriffs from neighboring towns joined in. Volunteers saddled up their horses. Some folks, armed with hunting rifles, took off into the hills, hoping they'd be the ones to catch the Santa robbers. Wanted posters were pinned up everywhere. Roadblocks popped up on dirt paths and highways. Even ranchers out in the middle of nowhere were on high alert. And in the middle of nowhere, the robbers were getting desperate. Lewis Davis, the one who had never robbed a bank before, had been shot during the escape. The wound was bad, and he started to bleed heavily. He tried to keep moving, but his body couldn't take it. He slowed down and collapsed. And before they could do anything, he was gone. Ratliff and the others buried him in a shallow grave near the town of Putnam. It wasn't long before another was captured. Hill and Ratliff were caught near the town of Graham. Helms, the hot-tempered one, was found soon after. They were alive, but their freedom was over, or so everyone thought. The trial came fast. Texas didn't waste time. Henry Helms was tried, found guilty, and sentenced to die in the electric chair. Robert Hill, the youngest, got 99 years. He served part of his sentence behind bars. After some time, he was granted parole. After getting out, he kept a low profile and stayed out of trouble. Some people even say he turned his life around and became a model citizen, living quietly all the way into the 1990s. And Ratliff, the man behind the beard, he wasn't done yet. While in jail, he began acting strangely. He stopped eating, refused to talk, and even claimed that he couldn't walk. He stopped caring for himself, covering his body in dirt and waste. At night, he screamed nonstop, keeping everyone awake. During the day, he just sat there, silent, staring at the wall like he was a zombie. He said he was insane. Now, here comes the real question. Was he pretending? Maybe he was. Or maybe he really lost his mind. The jury wasn't sure if he was telling the truth or just pretending. But in the end, it didn't matter to them. They had enough. So, they gave him the death sentence. But the people of Eastland County didn't want to wait for the state to execute him. They wanted justice. Immediately, on November 19th, 1929, a crowd began to form outside the jail. Some wore masks, others didn't bother. They pushed past the guards and No one dared to stop them. They dragged Ratliff out of his cell, still wearing the tattered remains of his Santa suit. He begged not to kill him, but no one listened. They hanged him in front of the courthouse. No one was ever charged. In the end, the man who once played Santa was buried with no fanfare, no gifts, no joy, just silence. So what really happened in Cisco, Texas, that winter? A small town became the battleground for one of the wildest crimes in American history. A man dressed as Santa Claus walked into a bank and left a trail of blood, fear, and tragedy. Families were torn apart. Innocent people died. And justice didn't come from the law, but from the people. It's a story that sounds too insane to be real, but every part of it happened. It's been nearly a century, but in Cisco, the memory of the Santa Claus Bank Robbery still lingers. And every Christmas, when the red suits come out and the carols begin, some folks still whisper the warning, not every Santa is who you think he is. What kind of man dresses up as Santa and ends up robbing a bank at gunpoint? If stories like this make you curious about the darker corners of history, hit subscribe so you never miss what's coming next. Want more jaw-dropping crimes that time almost forgot? Check out our previous episodes. You won't believe what else we've uncovered. See you soon with our next video.